Yep.
Recording. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Welcome back to another one here. Episode number 7. When it's all said and done, we took a little hiatus. If you're just checking out this one, we have a couple more we started filming here, and as we mentioned in those, we're going to try to keep these coming when we have time and availability to do so. Not a whole lot going on right now, deer-wise. It's obviously the off season, if you want to call it that. Been looking for some sheds, starting to think about some food plot stuff. Turkey's obviously around the corner.
I did some frost seeding.
Oh, did you get that in?
Yeah.
Nice.
Not much for frost since
Yeah.
then. I still think it'll do well. I have a lot of mouse ear chickweed that I'm maybe going to be battling. It was already kind of looking green.
Yeah.
But I went ahead and frost seeded all my plots. This week, looks... Well, I guess we're into, Wednesday?
Yeah, it's been like 60 the last couple of days, I think, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if we'll start to see some germination. That was kind of why I held off, was I didn't want to frost seed and then get, germination and then a crazy hard frost and lose my progress there. But yeah, did that this past weekend, did a little shed hunting. Pretty much to no avail. Found one.
I feel like I've already kind of got over the hump with sheds. I had like a week or so there where I was like hitting it hard, and I don't know.
I love it.
I do too. It's so fun.
I haven't lost the bug. The weather plays a part in that.
Yeah.
65 degrees and bright sun that we've had this week doesn't feel right to be shed hunting.
No, missing a lot.
Definitely feels like you're missing a lot. I think that was part of our problem this past weekend. And I also think the weather where we were looking played a big part in that. Like, hill country, Ohio, whatever, big woods. Traditionally, we found a lot in fields, whether that be like fescue or just regular grass or food plots or whatever. I don't know. Generally deer hit green fields when the weather's a little bit better, and then grain when you got, nasty cold weather. Of course, there's not a lot of grain in that area. I think with the amount of snow that we had that stayed on the ground, the deer just couldn't get to the grass fields or whatever. And so they resorted to feeding on like woody browse.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we haven't had any luck finding them in the fields. So I feel like there's probably a lot still out there. I know Abby got discouraged because she's like, normally we pick up 5 right here. And I'm like, yeah, well, they're probably out here somewhere. Like, it's not like the deer aren't here. Doesn't really feel like they are, but yeah, I'm sure there's sheds out there, just harder to find when you're looking in.
Yeah, I feel like every year with shed hunting, it's like a clean slate because of crop rotation and, like you said, weather. If there's been more snow covering up some of the easy food that they would get to in years past, like I never find them. I feel like in the in the same areas. Well, I shouldn't say that. You find them in the same areas, but not always the same concentrated spot. And
when you're looking at like 20-acre wood blocks, it's like you can cover that really, really well pretty quickly. When you're looking in like hundreds of acres of just straight timber,
yeah,
it's tough. And this year we didn't have any deer that we like especially wanted to find, which also provides a little motivation when you have that to hit it harder.
Yeah.
But without that, it was kind of like by the end of the weekend, I'd given up and was ready to just grab the chainsaw. And
that's why I said I feel like I'm over the hump. I'm thinking about burning and timber and food plots and that fun stuff, especially now that the days are longer too. It's just like I'm ready for the next thing.
One thing I couldn't help but like do this weekend as I was walking around looking for sheds was I found myself with fresh intel, or I don't know, while it's fresh in the memory bank of like what happened this past season with deer and whatever and what deer we're doing, is like stopping in particular spots while everything's right there and being like, okay, next year this is what I need to do. Because I feel like if you don't stop and think about that now and you wait till August when you're really ready for deer season, it's like, okay, what did they do last year? I feel like I don't remember or like have a good recollection of, okay, what do I need to do differently this year that I didn't do last that might put me in a better position?
Yeah.
If you do it now, especially because sign is so obvious, like trails right now look like mud.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, you can still find scrapes and rubs and whatever and beds. I feel like now is the time to be game planning how you're going to hit it next year.
Yeah, if you have the open mind and willingness to go out there and read what it's telling you. That's why I liked our rabbit hunt so much with the snow on the ground. Yeah. I found myself constantly thinking like, man, look at this trail, right? You tell exactly where it's going. I know where they were heading. It's like that where can you hang a stand?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, your brain's just constantly
Yep.
thinking of little small tweaks.
Yeah. When I talked to Josh today, he had said he struggled to find particular spots to put cameras, like where he's not picking up deer that he ends up, taking or whatever. And he's like, why am I not getting these deer on camera? And so he said he went out and found these trails and was like, okay, this is where I'm putting cameras next year, because clearly you can find them right now. And evidently, if I'm not getting them where I have cameras, maybe this is where I should be.
I think there's definitely a correlation there between being open to doing that type of stuff or having your brain think that way and killing deer consistently, because there's a lot of people that, and no fault to them, heck, I grew up hunting this way, but you go and hunt the same stand year over year, sit after sit, and yeah, you have luck into one a time or two, a broken clock's right twice a day type thing, but the people that constantly mix it up and are thinking that way outside of the box, like, I bet he'll find success with that. He'll probably next year kill one that he gets a picture of.
Yep.
But it's cool. Yeah, that's fun stuff, and it's that time of year. Something before we get rolling too far into this, I was going to mention again. We started working with Redmond Trophy Rock, or Redmond Hunt. If you guys, we have a discount code we can share with you guys if you want to get on and order any of that stuff. I still got to get. I want to get some of the liquid stuff out. I put one of the blocks out, but I want to get some of that liquid out. I feel like just building a site with just like the regular Trophy Rock, the like block, and then just like pour liquid all over it and just like on steroids.
Did you use the apple?
Yeah.
Is that what you used?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to say, I feel like I'm saving that for like a special occasion, like
Gotcha.
a hot date or something.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know why.
The right
like,
deer or something.
I looked at it in the garage before I went, to the farm, and was like, I don't know. And I ended up taking just a rock and a bag of 465.
Nice.
So I, put out a rock and coated it with 465 and had some of that on the ground on a stump and
There you
stuff.
go.
It looked good.
Yeah. Did you put a cell cam over it?
No.
Gotcha.
Nope.
Just let it soak for a while.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep, pulled the cameras.
Cool. Well, yeah, Venari 20, if you guys get online and want to order anything, get a little bit of a discount. It's that time of year, obviously, as well. So feel free to use it. But we're going to talk about this sucker right here. Different buck sitting up here than we've had on the last couple of episodes. This is a deer you shot this past November, right?
I think the 15th.
15th of November.
Yep.
It's always a fun time to hunt. Seems like that's when I think I say this every year, but there's this like, it's like the first week of November has this like mystique about it. Like everybody's just like first week of November, like rut. But anymore, I would take, I think, like the 15th, middle of November over the first week of November any day of the week.
That hunt was crazy too. Like, we've been to this piece numerous times. However, that was by far like the most deer I've seen, the most bucks I've seen. Like, super awesome. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yep.
Yeah, and on some pretty rough public land too. Like,
yeah,
cool hunt, which I think we should dive into. So we try to take a couple trips each year, mix things up. I know we got some different plans heading into this 2025-2026 season, but we've spent some time hunting this area, and you and Corey got down before me, but used a boat to access this spot. What is there anything that like you feel like was a separating factor or a contributing factor with the boat to killing this deer that maybe if you didn't use or if you guys didn't have, the hunt would have played out differently? Like, would you have hunted that spot if you didn't have the boat?
Never. No. And we've been talking about going over here for a rut hunt for years.
Yeah.
Like, I've talked to numerous guys over however many years we've hunted it that have said, it's a great rut spot, and we've never done it. I think maybe we'd been down there in November another year bow hunting.
Yeah. It was 2020 when we all shot bucks, like before October
in the first 2 weeks
or whatever. Yeah.
So we've been talking about going over here and trying to make a trip out of it. Just the stars hadn't aligned yet. So,
which I'm trying to think why we did, because I had my buck this year, but you didn't in Ohio.
I don't think
Corey, I don't know if he did or not. I don't think he did. So we must have
I just didn't
said,
have anything to chase. Like,
just forget it.
I didn't really care to be here.
Yeah.
And when you're going to another state and you're going to hunt public land, it's kind of like, you don't know what you're going to be chasing, and your standard of what you would probably be willing to shoot is a little bit less. So just the idea of being somewhere where I at least don't know that I'm not going to see what I want Whereas in Ohio, it was kind of like, I know I'm not going to see anything.
It's a really refreshing, like, reset to just...
A little rejuvenation.
Pressure's off, like, kind of whatever happens. And like you said, yeah, you're a little more willing to shoot maybe something of a younger age or smaller rack or whatever. Just, it's easier to... It seems like, at least for me, it's easier to kind of, like, check that box.
It's just, it's a nice breath of fresh air, too, like a little hard reset. If you're getting wore out or frustrated, in your home state or whatever. So, yeah, I met Corey over there. I think it was a Friday night. He pulled the boat with him. So I ended up getting in sometime in the afternoon. I think I took a half day off of work or maybe even a full day. I don't remember. But by the time I got there, he was like, antsy, ready to go, had the boat all ready to rock. So we definitely wouldn't have probably hunted this spot that particular weekend. I know you and I had went there a previous year. I don't remember when that was.
I hunted close to there with Jake earlier in, I think it was, it would have been October, and we made the walk, and it's back there. It's a pain. And you shoot a deer, and it's like, it was kind of, I took the approach of like, we're going to go hunt it, and if we shoot a deer, we'll figure it out when we shoot the deer.
That's best case scenario.
We'll worry about that if and when it happens. But a boat makes that whole experience a little bit easier on everyone.
Yeah. I think when you and I went into that spot, it was like pushing 2 hours to get back in there. I know you kind of accessed with Jake from a different location, but it's like, when you're talking about that kind of time investment, especially if you're looking at like a morning hunt, maybe in a different spot, and then midday you want to check cameras or scout a spot, or even, hunting aside, like take a nap or go back to the, cabin or camp or whatever and get a snack. Like, banking on a 2-hour walk in for an evening hunt is pretty daunting. And it's like, it also significantly cuts down your time in the middle of the day to maybe be productive and check cameras or whatever. So having the boat cut, maybe a 2-hour walk down to a 25-minute boat ride.
Yeah. It's kind of a no-brainer if you have access to a boat.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, so we didn't really have a particular pin or spot that we planned on going to. I wasn't sure how close to that location you had hunted with Jake previously, but we didn't even plan on being on that side. Once we got up there, Corey kind of turned to me and asked, where I wanted to be at, and I told him I didn't really care, and he just said, pick a side, basically, tell me where you want to go. And previously in the ride, like, maybe 100 yards down the river, I had seen a spot that I thought looked good. Like, I don't know if it just looked deery, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, to somebody that...
I was going to say, anyone listening to this that's a diehard hunter knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it just, for whatever reason, like, caught my eye, so I told Corey, I was like, let's go to this side. Kind of a spur-of-the-moment idea, whatever. So we pull the boat up, and it sounded like he didn't really care, so he's like, just go wherever. So I told him where I was going. I'm going to go this way. He just decided to go that way. And I just decided I was probably going to walk until I found something that looked okay. So I found a scrape close to the water that I hung a camera over on my way in, and then I continued to push a little bit deeper. I think I ended up probably 100 yards from the camera. And I don't even know why I picked that exact spot. Like, nothing about it really satisfied me. There was kind of like a little drainage, if you will, that went out to the main water source. There was no, water. It wasn't a creek or anything. But I hung on that in my saddle, and I thought maybe if my thermal started to pull down, they'd just suck down into there. There was a trail, and then there was like a big thicket. So I was kind of on like a transition between this bottom and then a thicket. And that was basically all I was really hunting. Like, no other reason other than that.
Something that stood out to me when you were just describing that, and well, like two things actually. I feel like anymore, like when you said that spot looks deery, like I used to just like, second guess myself and quite, like you go there, what about there? Seems like the hunts where you just like trust your gut and okay, that spot looks good and just go. Like those are the ones. Maybe you don't always have success, but it seems like that's when I have my best sits. Because I used to just find any reason to like talk myself out of something and go the other direction, or vice versa. It's like if you got that feeling, like that instinct, like just stick to your
like
gut.
Intuitive is kind of what it felt like.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
There's something to that, and I like too I've picked up on anymore. You almost always have a camera, whether it be a cell camera or a traditional camera, going in on a hunt. Like you just like pull a camera out of your rear end, and that's smart. Like, yeah, you're killing two birds with one stone, but it's like spend all that time going out there, taking the boat back, whatever. It's like you might as well. Yeah, you're gonna get a hunt or two in, but you might as well throw something else out there that's gonna help you next year, 2 years, 10 years down the road.
I think that was a product of I guess any type of hunting, but specifically out of state, when generally you're there for a weekend. And I don't traditionally bring the camera home with me, so I plan on leaving it, but it's like if I can essentially hunt 2 spots for every sit, so even though I'm not sitting with the camera, it's like the camera's on a hunt of its own.
Yeah.
So whether I check it, after I'm done hunting or at the end of the weekend or just straight up leave it, like I'm getting intel from the spot that I'm at, and the camera's getting intel from the spot that it's at. So even though I'm not going to shoot whatever the camera gets on it, like at least for future reference, I can say, okay, I sat over here and didn't see squat. This camera was over here and, had a buck on it.
That's like when people reference a trail camera, cell camera, or non-cell cam as a tool, like that's using it as a tool.
Yeah.
Like that's we've all put them over corn piles, but like that's how I think they were probably originally intended to be used.
Sure.
And now, I know we have mixed feelings about cell cameras, but like with the cell cameras too, like being an out of state hunt, like holy cow, like you're learning so much. If you need to sneak away for 2 days because that camera that's on a hunt of its own is sending you valuable intel, like now you can. It's just a cool concept.
Yeah. So despite, I don't want to say I was in love with the spot. I really didn't love the spot. I hated the setup.
Did it still look, were you close enough to the deery area that it still looked like this looks like a good spot, or did you get to a point where you were kind of like,
It looked like it could be okay. There was a field not too far away that I could see on a map, but I couldn't see it in person, so I didn't know what that was. I didn't know if somehow if it was planted, if it was ag, or what it was, if it was overgrown or whatever.
It is overgrown, or it was overgrown this year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So I ended up getting set up, and again, I'm in like this little drainage, or I don't know what you want to call it, like a depression essentially. So the base of my tree was at a lower elevation, and then I want to say I only got like 2 sticks up. Like I was not high, maybe from the base of my tree like 12 feet, something like that. And I think that was because of the amount of sticks and limbs and vines and stuff, that if I got up any higher, like I wasn't going to be able to shoot anything. And I also didn't really know what I was anticipating on being able to shoot. Like there was a trail, but I couldn't really tell if like that's where I expected the deer to be. And I had told Corey, because I get hounded for being too picky, whether it's in Ohio or out of state, like especially Corey. Yeah, you're not going to shoot anything. So I told him, I said, if it has forks, if it has splits, I'll shoot it. Like I'm not going to be picky. Like we want to get a deer. Especially like the whole experience with like having the boat and everything. Like you're out of state, and I hadn't shot anything in Ohio, so it's like I want to get something.
Yeah, there's the meat element and the experience element. Like it seems like it's like you got the antlers, you got the experience, you got the food aspect, and like anymore, if you can, especially on those out of state trips, you can check a couple of those boxes. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, and I knew like just the idea of hanging a deer in camp, and you were coming down. Like I really wanted to do that, so it was funny and like super ironic. I would say within 20 minutes of being set up, I see this little, and coming out of the thicket 25 yards in front of me, I see a deer coming. I'm like, I think it's a doe. And it gets to like 15 yards, and it's still, I mean, it's obviously super close, and it's in some cover, but not like much cover. So this is very telling about the size of deer. I still thought it was a doe. And then all of a sudden, he's like right there. And he has, I mean, as close to not having forks, but still having forks as you could possibly get. And I was just like, I totally deserve this. Like, I said I'd shoot it. And so to honor my word, I made a very half-hearted attempt to set up for a shot. And like, I grabbed my bow. I didn't even draw on it because it was kind of on to me. And I don't know if my thermals, I don't remember exactly what the wind was doing that night, but I don't think my thermals were pulling down into that drainage. So they were kind of blowing that direction. And so the deer was kind of like somewhat onto me. And so essentially,
like, thank goodness.
Essentially, I kind of just let it slip. And I know my GoPro is fully charged and it died like on the spot. I have no idea why.
Usually how it goes.
Yeah. And it was 100% battery, dead. And then my main angle ended up dying as well. And so fortunately this thing works off. And it was funny. I think over the next, whatever hour or so, I saw like 3 or 4 deer almost exactly like him, like these super tiny little scrubby forks and basket racks or whatever. None of the other deer were in range. And I don't know if did we record a podcast on the whole story or anything?
No.
This is okay.
This is it.
Sure. This is the podcast. Yeah. Okay. I think I saw a couple does. Like it's crazy how quickly it slips your memory. But like I want to say I saw a couple does or whatever. And then finally I saw like a really good buck, like a really, really solid buck, the type of buck that we've been talking about hopefully getting on at some point. And he was coming down along the river, and I could tell he may not come within range, but at the same time he was kind of angling like kind of towards that drainage. So I was all twisted up in my saddle, getting spun around, anticipating him coming in. And I think he ended up crossing at like 50 yards, 45 yards, which at 45, I might consider it. But he was just in like enough, I wouldn't even say cover. It was just random sporadic trees that prevented me from being able to shoot him. And I also had in the back of my head that Corey was the exact direction he was going. Also in typical Corey fashion, unbeknownst to me, he had gotten down from that setup and relocated entirely to the next county.
Do you think he ended up, I guess I forgot or didn't know that, do you think he ended up walking past his like original post or where he was supposed to
Yes.
or gonna be?
Yes.
No kidding.
Yeah. After kind of a fast forward, that at the end of the weekend, I ended up going back into that spot to pull that camera and accessed from the direction that deer went, and kind of seeing the topography and what the habitat looked like. I think it was very likely that he continued in the direction that Corey was and would have ended up in his lap.
Oh, imagine doubling.
It'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Because that deer was much bigger. Like that was a really solid deer. So I was bummed out, but then in the back of my head, I'm kind of thinking, well, who knows? Like this very well could end up, being a deer that Corey shoots. So I think probably within 20 or 30 minutes maybe of seeing that deer, I hear a grunt kind of in that similar direction, but the trail that was, basically right at the base of my tree looped towards the river along the thicket. So I hear grunting, whatever, and I look down and it's this deer. And my first reaction was that deer looks old. Like his face was just like pure white. And obviously we've talked, like I've seen young deer with or lighter or white or gray, whatever looking hides. But something about this one just looked like, and maybe it was because he was rutted up and like his body just looked beefier or whatever. But like, I just remember thinking that like, dude, this thing's ancient.
Yeah. If you're watching this, we'll throw some pictures up on the screen and you can guess maybe what you think his age is, and we'll reveal that here at the end of the episode. But
yeah, so he's coming down this trail straight at me, and so I'm kind of internally panicking because he's on my weak side, walking straight at me with his head facing right at the base of my tree, and he's probably already at 25 yards and closing, and he was grunting like he was clearly on a mission, like a rutted up deer. But I quickly realized if he stayed on that trail, I was going to have to draw and shoot him point blank, and there was never going to be a good opportunity to draw, like where a tree or a brush or whatever provided you some cover. So essentially, I got my bow, got it up over my bridge, and got it on, the weak side, hooked to my D-loop, and once he got to like 10 yards maybe, I just ripped it back as fast as I could. It was one of those where it's like, slow isn't going to be the strategy. It's going to be rip it back when you're ready to shoot, basically, and shoot. So, sure enough, as soon as I draw, he stopped dead in his tracks, and he didn't look up at me. And I had mentioned I wasn't super high in the tree, and this trail, I think, probably crossed within 5 yards of the base of my tree, but it was at a higher elevation. So I'd say this thing probably gave the deer 4 feet of elevation. So like I'm maybe like 6 to 8 feet above him. And by the time he stopped, he was probably within 8 yards maybe. And so when he stopped, it was essentially, point and shoot, not even aim. Like I remember looking through my sight and the housing was just brown. Like the whole housing was brown.
That's so awesome.
So when I shot, like normally when you shoot, like there's enough reaction time that you can see where that arrow hits. And I shot and like it was bang bang.
I was gonna say the sound too. Like you can usually hear your bow release and then you hear the impact. It was probably just all one.
Yeah,
one.
It was
sound.
just one giant motion, one giant sound. Like no idea where it hit him. I thought it hit him. I knew it hit him. Whatever. And he took off and he dropped down into that drainage and then cut up into some thicker timber. And I listened, and it was pretty quiet in there at that point. And I thought I maybe heard a crash, but I wasn't real sure. Like it was very faint if it was. And so I'm sitting there, and I remember I tried to call you, and fortunately I was glad, but I didn't have service. So like the call didn't go through. So I'm like, okay, cool. I knew I couldn't call Corey because I didn't have service. And it was getting dark, and I didn't have a headlamp for some reason. So I used, because it was starting to get dark, I used my phone light, and it was right at that weird time of the evening where it's like the light wasn't doing anything for me, but like it was also, I could have used some light, but it wasn't dark enough that the phone helped at all. So I looked at the arrow and I really couldn't tell. And then almost immediately there was good blood. So I just kind of continued to follow it and just creep up real slow, like not committing to a full track job, but just reading it and continued to read it. And then finally it was easy to track through that drainage. And then once I got to the timber, I made it in only a handful of yards, and I thought I could see him, but it was even darker in there. So I said, I'll just creep up to see if that's him. And if it isn't, I'll probably just back out. And sure enough, it was just him laying there dead, which was sweet because I think he probably only made it like 80 yards.
Yeah, you smoked him.
Yeah, shot ended up being lung and then the top of the heart. I think it was cool. I shoot a fixed 4-blade. It was the Exodus head?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so it's a 4-blade, and 2 of the blades just ripped his heart open, which was cool. Pumped out blood. The shot was perfect for the angle that it was, even though I wasn't way above him. Because it was so close, the angle was still kind of steep, and it came out like right in his armpit. Entry was, higher, obviously. Came out in his armpit, and he poured blood. And I was trying to think, like, Corey likes to move things along pretty quick. So I'm like, I took a couple pictures on my own and just decided to go ahead and drag him most of the way. And by the time I got him out of that thicker stuff, I was gassed and was like, I'll just meet Corey at the boat.
Yeah. So he ran 80 yards from your setup. How far were you from the river? Like, how far did he, from point of death to river, how far did you have to go?
Probably 150, maybe.
Not too bad.
Would be my guess.
Yeah,
I left my bow with him because, again, I didn't have a light, and I had a lighted knock on the arrow. That way, I knew I could find it, obviously, with enough time, but I figured if I had the lighted knock with the deer, we could find it a little bit easier. We did get super turned around when we went back in there because I met Corey, and I forget what I said. I see him coming through the timber, and it was still kind of light or whatever, light enough, and I was like, oh, shoot, dude, I forgot my bow back there. And he's like, you shot one, didn't you? I was like, yeah, I shot one. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was so fun.
I forgot about that. That's awesome.
Yep. So
I forget, did he see any? I don't think he did he?
I don't believe so. And I told him right away, like when I met him at the boat, I was like, dude, did you see that giant? And he was like, no, where was it? And I kind of explained it to him, and he's like, essentially kind of sounds like where I was. He goes, but I got down and moved. And I'm like, oh like, you probably would have seen him.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing. I think he was encouraged too, just to hear that I saw as many deer that I did. And I marked on my way out the location along the river closest to the deer. That way we could just jump straight in the boat and go back that direction and then just pull off where the deer was. That way we just only had to pull the deer straight to the river.
Smart.
Yep.
What do you think they were in there for? Like it seems like, you know, like around here, more like ag country, right? They can only be like so many places.
Yeah.
In that big timber setting, it's like a lot of times it seems like they're really spread out, but obviously there was a like pocket of deer there. November 15th, was it does? Was it a food source? Was it both? Cover?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I mean, I'm trying to remember. The big one that I saw ripped a scrape open, and there were a lot of scrapes along that river bottom. So I don't know if they were coming down from higher elevation to hit scrapes. That was kind of my interpretation.
There was no does?
I feel like I saw some does in the midst of seeing those younger bucks early in the hunt.
Oh, you did say that.
As best as I recall.
Yeah.
Not super noteworthy. But yeah, it seems like there were. But yeah, I guess I just assumed, you know, get along the river, travel corridor, it's November, maybe you catch them hitting some of these scrapes.
Yeah.
Was kind of my philosophy.
Good strategy, obviously.
Yeah, panned out, and I think I was even more so than killing the buck, excited just to have like a good hunt, because we've really struggled like in years past, like really, really struggled.
There's been multiple trips that I've taken where I have not seen a deer.
Yeah.
A deer.
Yeah.
So that was like, which I had no idea. I was coming down late, and I think you guys called me about like getting beer or something for you, and I was like, you know, did you guys have a good hunt? I think you or Corey or somebody was like, oh, saw a giant, but that was like the extent of the conversation. And then I pulled into camp, and this thing's hanging in camp, so we were pretty riled up at that point.
To this day, like, this goes down as probably one of the most like pinnacle peak moments of my life, because you go over there, you get in a boat, which is something I've always wanted to do, is kill a deer in a boat. Yeah, jump in a boat, hit this spot, see a pile of deer, see some really good deer, kill a deer, get it out. And this night happened to be when Ontario was playing Shelby, you know, tournament football, whatever. Corey brought some steaks that were freaking incredible. He pan fried these steaks, threw them in the oven with some butter and a cast iron skillet, and then proceeded to watch the greatest football comeback in high school football history.
Yeah.
And like, one of those nights where it's like, I don't know what else could possibly happen that would make this better.
If you could bottle it up and just take a shot of that every day, life would be good.
Yep. We were rushing back to camp to try to, you know, get the game on and stuff. And, you know, I'm trying to watch it on my phone, and I think Abby was texting me with updates, and I had called her from the boat at the river to let her know I had shot one, and I got a call to go through, and I basically just, you know, I shot one, whatever, and that was, you know, I think the call failed or something at that point, but she knew. So yeah, super, super, super awesome.
I might be biased because I wasn't there for that entire experience, just the tail end, but in my opinion, one of the coolest things about that entire experience just happened. It's March 12th. Just happened like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, if you want to jump into that, we can.
I'm trying to, unless we missed anything with the hunt. I mean, we proceeded to hunt the next afternoon. I think was it. So I saw a good one. So yeah, it was a great weekend as far as success goes, and camaraderie, and just having a blast and all that with your buddies. But also, I feel like we learned a lot too. It kind of feels like we kind of entered the next like tier of intel and all that fun stuff.
Yeah,
but
a rejuvenation of morale for hunting, not only that spot or that area, but just like in general, is like we can get on them. We're learning different types of terrain and how to hunt in different areas, which was exciting. But then to see the type of deer that we've been told so many times are there by different people, and different people that have shot them and seen them, and it's like, you know, where are these things? And then we finally saw him.
It's not an exaggeration to say that every time we're there, literally every time, we run into at least one, sometimes multiple people, and they almost say the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time.
Yeah.
It kind of became like weird. Like you run once again. Talked to another guy, said they, shot a 180 here or something. It's just like everyone's got that story. And
we ran into a lady when we were putting the boat in, and she stopped at some, oh, you guys deer hunt, whatever. We told her, and she had asked us if we'd ever shot anything there, and we're like, yeah, a couple, not so great bucks or whatever. And she's like, oh yeah, my husband, whatever, he just hunted here, whatever it was, and shot some giant 12 point. She didn't show us a picture, but some massive deer, and it's like, gosh, I feel like trying to give us credit for being okay hunters, not even great hunters, but it's like, why don't we even see these deer?
Sometimes I think we overthink it, but hopefully on the right track now.
I think we are. Yeah,
I think so too.
Like you alluded to, the story, I guess, kind of came to a close or whatever this past Friday. Something I've started to do here more recently is submit my deer, the two incisors, for cementum annuli aging. And I started doing it last year with the buck I shot in Ohio. That deer came back at 5.5, which was a kind of a cool trial run because we anticipated that he was probably 5. Had seen him the year before, had sheds to him from that year as well, and then shot him at what we believe 5, and then sure enough, it came back at 5. This deer was kind of a toss-up for me because there's different things, different characteristics that you can look at to try to age a deer. And like, obviously I had mentioned he looked super gray and old. If that's a credible way to age a deer, I don't know. Then you hear, basal circumference, which obviously this thing, those are not very big bases.
If you take the rack just by itself and don't look at the pictures of the deer or anything like that, I think if you ask 10 people, like, how old do you think that deer is, they'd probably say like 2 or 3.
Which it's funny, I think I posted a poll on our story, and that gave you the opportunity to look at the hide too and use that to factor into your decision of how old he was. But I think so many people are trained to look at rack only that the vast majority, and I could pull it up, the vast majority of people said he was, I believe, 3, maybe even 2.
Yeah.
2 and 3 accounted for like 75% of the votes.
Yeah. Something else you brought up the other day when you called me about his teeth or his age, and we were talking about like his neck being rutted up or whatever. Mm-hmm. I hadn't really considered that, but once again, you go back to the face and how old he looks. But the other thing that I didn't think about is I went back and looked at the picture of you standing next to it when you have it hung.
Yeah.
And I remember taking that picture and thinking, dude, that thing like towers over you. Like his nose is on the ground and there's like feet above your head.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's an indication or not. Like, I don't know, if that just depends on genetics or whatever, not necessarily age, but like it was a massive deer.
Yeah.
Also.
Region, obviously, you could have an 8.5-year-old or 9, whatever, however old, down in like Florida, like
sure,
tiny deer, whatever. But even within our own region, like Ohio, we chased that 200 and whatever inch years ago, and that thing's body was like a yearling doe.
Yep.
Tiny body. So it's hard to use that as a metric, but I think it holds some weight in some cases. Like, I've never weighed deer ever in my life, and it's something that I would like to start doing. For some reason, I'm becoming more interested in like the data about them, which is why I've started aging. I mean, that's kind of what spurred it all. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there was anything else, but it was kind of like I didn't want to make a hard guess of my own, because it's like you have the rutted up neck working against the size of rack, like kind of contradicting each other.
Well, his face was white, but it was also, and I'm not going to describe it accurately probably, but like it looked just like worn down, like battered,
tired.
And it did.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just me making that up in my head, but just looking at it, it was white, but it also just almost like wrinkly. It looked like an old person, but in deer form.
Yeah, I have a picture of his like when I caped him out, and his head or whatever, and like his just around his eyes and stuff even kind of just looked tired.
Yep.
But I also didn't want to be the person that's like, oh, dude, this thing ancient.
Which
Like
95% of the time probably is just like, oh yeah, he was a 5.5-year-old. There's probably not a whole lot of time if you're watching a video or listening to a podcast and somebody says that there's actual
right,
data behind it that's backing that.
Yeah.
But in this case, there is.
And in this case, it's gonna influence people to over guess age, which is probably what in most cases people shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Most people should be under guessing what they're gonna say. Like I feel like most deer end up being younger than what we like to think because it's natural for us to want to, whatever, inflate ages and scores and all that stuff.
Seems like the only way you can like really, really accurately guess a deer's age if you don't age its teeth is if they have some sort of mark on their body where you can track them forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doe that I have on camera from the year that she was a fawn. She had like a white patch of missing hair behind her armpit, and she still has it to this day. So you can accurately say, okay, she was a yearling in 2016.
Yeah.
Here she is now, and you got the age. But aside from that, just the antlers and just looking at the body, it's tough.
Yeah, I think, obviously, if we're not trying to follow them from year to year, like when a deer's a yearling, when they're whatever, a 2-year-old, pretty easy to guess and tell. I feel like at 3 is when it becomes really stinking hard unless you start to have some of those characteristics where it's like it's an identifiable factor that you can trace with previous year's trail cam data and whatever.
Yep. Yeah, and if it's some like random rut buck or like this, like to really know, you got to send the teeth in.
Yep.
And before we get into what your results were, I think we mentioned this maybe on the last podcast, but there's like 2 main companies that do the aging, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's the one you use and what's the other one?
So I use Deer Age, and then there's also Matson's. I think they're both out in Montana. I believe Deer Age is in Missoula. I think they both might be actually.
And they want the incisors, or you can also send the jaw.
There's other options if I don't know what particular circumstances would make you do this, but like if say your incisors are screwed up or something, there are other ways to do it. That is the preferred way. I don't know if that's because of it results in the best accuracy or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I think there is an option for providing the whole lower jaw or the back portion of the jaw or something like that, but preferably the 2 middle lower incisors is what they want. And I will say this from experience, it's easiest to get those out like right when you kill the thing, not necessarily like right at the kill site, but like preferably sooner rather than later.
When did you take them out? Did you just put them in like a baggie, or?
I didn't mess with mine until after that weekend, probably like Monday. So I killed this thing Friday night, and it stayed on ice, so it stayed cool and fresh and whatever. But yeah, if you could do it that day, even when you kill it, get them out. They end up being like roughly maybe an inch long because you need the root with the tooth. Take both those out, throw them in a baggie, and throw them in the freezer or whatever, in the fridge or something. Like they're not going to go bad.
And then they send you like a kit, or you just...
Yep, you order the test kit online. So I looked back, I ordered mine on the 18th, and I shot the deer on the 15th. So like I knew I wanted to do it, went ahead and ordered it a few days later.
I guess you could probably just order some at the beginning of the season and just have them on deck, right?
Yeah, a lot of people do like bulk orders. You can order some and just have them saved, ready to go. So they send you a test kit, which comes with a little baggie with a barcode so they can identify that's your sample. You put those in there. And then there's a pamphlet that breaks down different methods for, what samples to provide, which, gives the option of like the lower jaw and the incisors and all that. And then I think it even breaks down how to do the removal, I believe. And then tells you how to package it. I will say it's important because mail can get smashed. Your samples can get smashed. So every time I've done it, I've used the bubble wrap envelopes. I don't know if that provides a ton of security. I mean, I could even go as far as like putting them in like a box to where they're not going to, because that's the concern is like with flat mail, they can get smashed and then your sample's ruined and they have no idea how old your deer is.
Yeah, better be safe than sorry, and then questioning if your deer's aged correctly or not.
Yeah.
That type of stuff gives me anxiety.
Yep. And then you can upgrade different packages. Some of those are length of time that you get results. I always do like the 90 days. I don't necessarily need them within, a month of me sending them in.
Yeah.
And then you can also upgrade to get a certificate, which I like to do for the sake of, when I'm 75 years old, I'm probably not going to log back into my deer age account and be like, how old was that buck that I shot in 2023? So I get the certificate that I can hang with the deer. It just says, this deer was certified by Cementum Annuli testing by deerage.com or whatever it is at such and such years old. And then you can put a little description in there like, he killed it in this county, this state, this date, whatever. He scored however many inches if you want.
With the incisors, do they give you a percent of like accuracy?
Yeah, that's on their website. So I was looking at it today. It actually depends on the species, which is cool. Like, I believe elk and moose were more accurate than whitetail. I think that has to do with because they I believe look at it under like a microscope, and they're looking for deposits that almost like aging a tree based on the rings. So I don't know, something to do with the deposit of a moose and elk. Maybe it's to do with the size of tooth. I'm not real sure. I believe the white-tailed deer was 85% accurate up to like 9 years old. And then obviously moose and elk were in the 90% accurate, which that tells you how inaccurate some of these other ways that people guess deer's age on. I mean, even just looking at just solely tooth wear for the back of the, the molars or whatever they are, like that is not accurate. And I think they might even list the accuracy of those ways on their website.
Because that there would be so many contributing factors to that, what their diet is,
Sure.
what their,
yeah.
probably genetics and that too. Like some people have terrible teeth and.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. So, 85% accurate. To me, that's good enough. And then there is an option if you completely disagree with the age that they come back with to have a second opinion done.
That's cool too.
Which I like.
Yeah. What do you think they would do if you just sent in like a couple human teeth one time?
Did they age you?
Yeah.
They might just age
you. Comes back wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be cool. We could try that sometime.
Yeah.
Be like, these clearly aren't deer teeth.
Yeah.
Because you can actually submit a picture of your animal, whether that be a deer, an elk, or whatever. You send in a picture, just a selfie or something.
Oh shoot! So you sent it in, and the results are now in.
Results came back.
I really wish
Friday.
So you called me whenever day that was, and I think I said, "Don't tell me, just save it for the podcast." I really wish we would have done that, but I know now. And
yeah. So he came back at 8.5 years old, which to me, like, I kind of, when I pulled up the results, I tried to cover like where it was gonna be coming up to kind of surprise myself, do a little reveal, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
Like super happy, because to me that's, just as impressive as shooting a, 5.5-year-old 160-inch deer. Obviously he's not 100, he might be 100 inches.
That's I mean, at the end of the day though, I think I would take that over the antler, especially on a trip like that, over the antler size any day. Like that made an already epic story 10 times cooler. I was so jacked when you told me that. Like that's just neat. I can't think of like, people post their deer age results all the time, and I can't think of many that I've seen that are that old. And just to think about, I know we started talking like 8.5 years ago. Like you were in college.
Yeah.
There was a couple other things we talked about that was just like mind-boggling to think about. Like,
because what'd you say, he was born in the spring of 2016?
Yeah, that'd be. I believe so.
Which to me, I was graduating high school then. I wasn't even in college yet. I went to college that fall that he would have been, a half-year-old.
The 5.5-year-old that you killed last year that was a giant wasn't even close to being born.
Yeah, 3 years from being born. He was just a sparkle in his mother's eye.
Like, think about that. Like, that giant 170-inch deer you killed last year wasn't even a little tiny fawn, and this dude was roaming around
at 3.5 years
woods.
old. Yeah,
at 3.5.
It does open a window of like all these different things to consider. Like one thing I keep going back to, and Corey brought up, was like, so what was he at 5.5? Maybe he was that right there. Never changed at all. Very possible.
Yeah,
but it's also just as possible that he was, 150 inches. Maybe he wasn't an 8, or was he an 8?
He doesn't have like a ton of mass, but he's also not like real tiny spindly. He's just got like a compact rack anyway. You know what I mean? It's just like a really funky, tight, compact rack. But
yeah. Was he one of those super tight, tall, like kind of mass heavy deer? That'd be super cool.
Right.
I wish there was a way to know and how he made it that long. And then another, aspect on all that is like on public land. I mentioned to you, there are dudes out there that pass deer. 100% dudes out there that pass deer. However, I would say maybe that's 10% of the guys. I would say the vast majority of people see an antlered buck and are shooting it every time.
And we know there's a lot of poaching and stuff down that way too.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it the things that he saw and did and lived through and experienced, and I hope somehow, some way in the next life we get answers to. But
yeah,
it's just fascinating. Once again, made a cool story even 10 times cooler. You probably will never kill a deer that old again.
I wondered about that too. Like, is this going to be the oldest deer I ever kill?
And who knows? Maybe in some remote places like that, deer get older, and maybe that's more common. But it seems like around here, an 8.5-year-old deer would be almost unheard of.
Virtual. I mean, not to say non-existent. It does happen, especially a inferior racked deer, because so much of what we see around here is high grading of very young deer. So maybe some of those deer like this just slip through the cracks every year because people don't want to shoot them. They're more concerned about shooting the 120-inch 2-year-old.
It's like the kid that gets bullied in school for whatever, like the little buck with bad genetics and a tiny rack gets bullied, but he kind of wins in the end because he's probably getting passed.
Yeah. And then the way it all comes to an end, like you think about this deer's 8.5-year story, and it's like, it came to end down in the river bottom. Like, did he live there his whole life? Did he, what did he do? He walks into the base of my tree and knew something was up, and I don't know, just like the whole.
Luckily for him, he couldn't have been taken by a more appreciative person. It could have been. He could have got slammed, by somebody during gun season that shot him after legal hours or something. So, but just so fascinating. But if you guys drop a comment and let us know your thoughts or what you guessed. If we put that picture up before and you look at it, what your thoughts are on it, and if you've ever heard of a deer being killed that old. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty out there. I think, like you said, there was a doe or something that was like 20, and I did go back.
I think it was like 23 and a half.
Yeah, which is wild, and I bet that's
insane.
More common with does.
Yes.
Especially in some of those remote areas where guys are going there specifically to hunt a buck. But regardless, just fascinating. I thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah, I was pretty tickled pink. That's why I was excited to call you, as I'm like, who would appreciate this as much as Nick? Because I know my wife doesn't give a crap. And I was like, I got to call Nick.
Yeah. Well, think about it, too. Like, let's say you picked that shed up. You'd be like 2.5-year-old deer.
Absolutely.
Like, without killing him,
yes,
you would never, ever know. You need the tooth.
Yep.
Like, you need the tooth.
Yeah, there's no other way that you would have it. I mean, I feel like older deer tend to put on mass, but it's like, in this case, that was not happening.
It's good. So. It's a good learning experience because you're right. Like, most of the time, I feel like I'm looking at the mass when I'm trying to think of a deer's age, and now we know like that isn't necessarily the factor you need to look at.
Another thing we brought up was like Lee Lakoski is like the one dude I can think of that puts a deer's peak as far as his rack the highest. I feel like most people say 5 and 6 are typically, and I would say that's probably the top of the bell curve in general of where a buck's rack is the biggest or best. Maybe 7.5, and I think Lee is up there in like the 7.5-year range, which is crazy because that would mean this deer peaked last year. Not to say this applies to every single deer, but like if that generalization was true, this thing was his biggest last year.
Yeah,
and maybe it was, but if the former is true and it's more like 5.5, then this dude's been on the downhill for 3 years.
Yeah, crazy, man. And like you said, also could have been this size for his entire life.
Yeah, not an area that has a particular like large amount of agriculture, pretty much heavy wooded hill country. Mm-hmm. So
I love how dark he is too.
Yeah,
he's got that chocolate dark rack.
Yep.
Yeah, so cool. So cool. Do you wish you got him mounted now?
In a way, yes.
Just because his face, like that.
His face was super cool. It would look like, I love character like that more than anything. I would say I like putting different types of deer on the wall. So in a way, yeah. And had I had this knowledge previously, I might have considered. I wish he was a little bit bigger. But yeah, at 8.5, like I think it'd be cool to be able to point to him and be like, yeah, that thing was old.
Look at that thing's
And
face.
especially if the mount reflected it. Like
Yeah.
if he looked old as a mounted deer.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But no, I think he'll be cool as a Euro. I'll slap him on the wall somewhere.
Absolutely. Got plenty of pictures of him too. So
Yep.
that's cool. And we'll be returning. I'm sure we'll be returning this season, and in the future as well. And now I feel like we got a little more intel to go.
I've got a lot of morale for a return trip. Anxious to see how our out of state applications pan out, what happens with that, and if we end up being pulled other directions this
I
fall.
was gonna say that's probably going to dictate a return trip. What happens with those? But
yeah, I have a feeling if we're elsewhere in potentially September and November,
Yep.
a return trip would be left in the hands of wives.
Yeah. Jobs.
Yeah. But I don't know. Something about the whitetails here recently. Well, I mean, for years, but particularly right now, have got me hooked, and I'm just more motivated than ever to get after deer and be in the woods.
It's a sickness. It is, and
It's crippling.
one I don't-
on top of the crippling sicknesses we already are dealing with.
No kidding. Golly, no kidding. But I think that'll about do it. We're going to be it's the 12th right now. We're going to head to the, I always call it the Deer and Turkey Expo because that's what it used to be. What's it called now?
It's now the Open Season Expo.
Open Season Expo. I feel like they went downhill in the name. That just sounds like a
It's open season. Shoot whatever you want.
Yeah, I like the Deer and Turkey Expo better.
I still call it that.
Yeah.
I feel like most people do. It's kind of the OG name that everybody still
I haven't
rolls with.
gone in, gosh, probably like 6 or 7 years, I want to say. So I'm excited to check it out. I know, it's not necessarily like top tier
Deer Classic, Iowa Deer Classic, or
WTF or any of that, but there'll be some friends there. Some, Tipton Creek's going to be there. Osceola's going to be there. 360?
360 hunting blinds, or at least some of their dealers will be there. Rich will be there. Trying to think. I think Lone Wolf might be there.
Yeah.
I'm excited for some of the seminars. I think the Wenzel brothers, right?
Yep. Wenzel. Who else? Shoot. Yeah, there's a few good ones this year.
Yeah.
I'm almost more excited for that and just catch up with some people and whatnot. So we'll probably, on the next one, we'll probably recap some of that. But yeah, I think that's all I got.
Yep.
The deal. We will see you guys on the next one.